The third default notice arrived today, and with it, the official confirmation that my life, as I knew it, is over. It wasn't a surprise, not really, but the cold finality of the legal jargon on the page still felt like a punch to the gut. The amount, staring back at me in bold, unforgiving numbers, is more than I make in 3 years. It's a sum that guarantees my financial ruin for the foreseeable future, a black hole from which I can see no escape. This piece of paper is the tombstone for a future I was carefully trying to build for myself, a future that was stolen from me, not by a stranger, but by the very people who were supposed to protect me. It's the culmination of a long and painful lesson in family dynamics. This debt wasn't for a house I live in or a car I drive. It wasn't for a medical emergency or my own education. It was for a ghost, a failed dream that belonged to my younger brother, Alex. The loan was for his boutique marketing agency, an idea he pitched with so much passion that it was impossible not to get swept up in it, at least for my parents. They saw a visionary, a future mogul who just needed a little push to get started. I saw the same pattern I had seen my entire life, a fleeting obsession propped up by our parents' blind faith and, this time, my financial stability. My name is on every single one of these threatening letters, a permanent reminder of the day I let my family's pressure override my own judgment. Alex has always been the sun in our family's solar system, and I was just a distant, uninteresting planet. He was the creative one, the charismatic one, the one with endless potential. My parents poured their resources into his every whim, from music lessons he abandoned to sports equipment that gathered dust. I was the responsible one, the quiet one who got good grades, worked a part-time job through high school, and carefully saved my money. My achievements were met with a polite nod, while Alex's slightest effort was celebrated with a feast. I was praised for my stability, but it seemed my only purpose was to be a reliable, boring backdrop for my brother's dazzling, chaotic life. So when Alex announced his plan to start his own agency, my parents were ecstatic. They saw it as his true calling, the venture that would finally stick. He had a flashy presentation, full of buzzwords and projections that seemed more like fantasy than finance. He spoke of synergy and disruption, but he had no concrete business plan, no client list, and no experience running anything more complex than his personal social media account. My parents, however, saw none of these red flags. They only saw their brilliant son on the cusp of greatness, and they were determined to make it happen, no matter the cost. The problem was, the cost was far beyond what they could immediately provide. The first hurdle was the bank. Alex, with his spotty work history and non-existent credit score, was immediately rejected for the business loan he needed. This should have been the end of it, a clear sign that the idea was not viable. For my parents, it was merely an obstacle, an injustice perpetrated by a system that couldn't recognize their son's genius. They tried to reason with the loan officer, offering to co-sign themselves, but their own savings were tied up in investments they were unwilling to touch, and their income wasn't high enough to secure the amount Alex was demanding. That was when their attention, as it so often did when a problem needed a sensible solution, turned to me. The first conversation was casual, almost a joke. We were at dinner and my father mentioned Alex's trouble with the bank. He then looked at me and said, "You've got a perfect credit score, don't you? Maybe you could help your brother out." I laughed it off, thinking he couldn't possibly be serious. I had spent a decade building that credit score, being meticulous with every payment, foregoing luxuries, and planning for my own future. I was saving for a down payment on a small apartment, a dream I was slowly getting closer to. The thought of jeopardizing that for one of Alex's whims was absurd to me, and I made that clear in a polite but firm way. That's when the pressure campaign began. It wasn't a single, explosive argument, but a slow, grinding erosion of my will. My mother would call me, her voice filled with disappointment, telling me how I was crushing Alex's spirit. She said that family is supposed to support each other, and I was acting like a selfish stranger. My father would take a different approach, trying to appeal to my logic. He'd talk about the potential returns, framing it as an investment in the family's future. He'd say it was a temporary measure, just to get the business off the ground, and that my involvement would be minimal. They painted a picture where my refusal was an act of profound betrayal. The guilt was a heavy blanket they expertly wrapped around me. Every family gathering became a tribunal where I was the silent defendant. Alex would sit there looking dejected, while my parents sang his praises and lamented the cruel world that was holding him back. They'd talk about his fragile confidence and how this rejection was affecting his mental health. The unspoken accusation was always hanging in the air. I had the power to make his dreams come true, and I was choosing not to. They made me feel like my prudence was a character flaw, that my desire to protect my own future was an attack on his. The breaking point came when they offered me their word. It was a Sunday evening, and they had cornered me in the kitchen. My father looked me directly in the eye and said, "We understand you're worried. This is our promise to you. We have our retirement savings. If, and it's a big if, anything goes wrong, we will step in and cover the payments. You will not lose a single penny. Your signature is just a formality for the bank. We are the real guarantors." My mother nodded in agreement, tears in her eyes, telling me they would never let anything bad happen to me. It was a solemn, heartfelt promise from the two people I was raised to trust implicitly. I wish I could say I fought harder, but I was exhausted. I was tired of being the villain, of the constant emotional blackmail. A part of me, a small, naive part, also wanted to believe them. I wanted to be the hero for once, the one who saved the day and finally earned their genuine respect. I imagined a future where Alex's business was a success, where he would be grateful, and where my parents would finally see me as an equal to him. I convinced myself that perhaps they were right, that I was being overly cautious. So against every instinct screaming in my head, I agreed. The relief on their faces was immediate and overwhelming. They hugged me, called me a wonderful son, and for a brief moment, I felt like I had made the right choice. The day I signed the paperwork at the bank felt surreal. The loan officer went over the terms, emphasizing that as a co-signer, I was fully responsible for the entire amount if the primary borrower defaulted. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes, and I just nodded, repeating the reassurances my parents had given me in my head. "It's just a formality," I told myself. Alex was there, beaming, already talking about the new office furniture he was going to buy. He didn't seem to grasp the gravity of the situation, the immense weight of the numbers on the page. For him, it was just free money, the start of his empire. For me, it was the beginning of the end. The first 6 months were a flurry of activity. Alex leased a trendy office space in the most expensive part of town, hired his friends, and spent lavishly on equipment and parties he called networking events. Whenever I asked to see the financials or a list of clients, he would get defensive, telling me I didn't understand the creative industry and that I needed to trust his process. My parents echoed this sentiment, telling me to stop hovering and let Alex work his magic. They were so caught up in the fantasy of his success that they refused to see the warning signs. They loved the idea of having a son who was a CEO, and they didn't want any reality to spoil that image. Then, the first payment was missed. I received a polite notification from the bank, which I immediately forwarded to Alex and my parents. Alex assured me it was a simple mix-up, a client who was late on an invoice, and that it would be sorted out by the next day. My parents told me not to worry, that these things happen in a new business. I wanted to believe them, so I let it go. But then it happened again the next month, and the month after that. The bank's letters started to lose their polite tone, and the calls started coming directly to my phone, as I was the one with the reliable contact information and the perfect payment history. The excuses from Alex became more and more elaborate. The market was tough, clients were fickle, a key employee had quit. He was always stressed, always on the verge of a breakthrough that never seemed to materialize. My parents, in turn, became his defenders. They told me I was putting too much pressure on him, that my constant questioning was stressing him out and hurting his creativity. They started sending him money directly to help with cash flow, all while the massive loan that bore my name was sinking deeper into delinquency. It became clear that they were enabling his failure, while I was the only one tethered to the consequences. The business officially folded just shy of its first anniversary. It collapsed under the weight of its own extravagance and lack of actual income. Alex had burned through the entire loan with almost nothing to show for it. There was no big announcement, no family meeting. I found out when I saw a "for lease" sign in the window of his once trendy office. He had simply walked away from it all, from the employees he'd hired, the vendors he owed, and the enormous debt he had created. He moved back into my parents' house, who welcomed him with open arms, treating him like a wounded soldier returning from battle. That's when I called the emergency family meeting. I laid out the bank statements, the default notices, and the total amount owed. I was calm, expecting that now, with the business officially dead, my parents would honor their promise. I reminded them of that Sunday evening in the kitchen, of the solemn vow they had made to me. I told them that the bank was preparing to take legal action and that my credit was already in ruins. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just scared, and I genuinely believed that they would do what they said they would do. I trusted them to be the backstop they had sworn to be. My father stared at the papers on the table and refused to meet my eyes. My mother started to cry softly. Then, my father cleared his throat and delivered the line that shattered my world. "Son," he said, his voice quiet, "we can't. We looked at our finances, and taking on this debt would put our retirement at risk. We have to think about our future." I was stunned into silence. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. I asked them about their promise, their word being their bond. I asked them how they could possibly do this to me. My mother, through her tears, said the most cutting thing of all. "Alex has been through so much," she sobbed. "He's lost his dream. We can't burden him with this failure. He needs to heal and start over. You're strong. You've always been the strong one. You'll figure it out." They had reframed the narrative in their minds. Alex was now the victim, and I was simply the solution, a tool to absorb the damage. My financial stability, the very thing they had used to secure the loan, was now the justification for abandoning me to deal with the fallout. The argument that followed was the worst in my life. I finally got angry, yelling, asking them how they could be so callous, so dishonest. My father's demeanor changed from apologetic to defensive. He told me that, legally, it was my signature on the loan. He said I was an adult who made a decision and I needed to live with the consequences. He completely absolved himself and my mother of any moral or financial responsibility. They had used me, and now that the tool was broken, they were simply discarding it. Their promise meant nothing. It was just a string of words they had used to get what they wanted. In the end, they made it clear that their priority was, and always had been, Alex. They had to protect his future, his reputation, and his fragile ego. My future, my reputation, and my financial health were acceptable sacrifices at his altar. They saw it as a simple calculation. Ruining one son to save the other was a trade they were willing to make, especially when the son being ruined was the one they had always taken for granted. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that it felt like I was suffocating. I wasn't just losing my savings, I was losing my family. The immediate aftermath was a nightmare of logistics. The bank initiated proceedings to garnish my wages. A significant portion of my paycheck now disappears before it even hits my account. I had to drain my entire savings, the money for my apartment down payment, just to pay off the initial legal fees and penalties, a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. The dream of owning my own home is gone, replaced by the struggle to simply pay rent and buy groceries. Every financial decision is now dictated by this colossal debt that isn't even mine. My credit score, once my greatest source of pride, is now a wasteland. It has plummeted to a level that makes me essentially a financial pariah. I was recently denied a small loan to replace my aging car, which I need for work. The reason cited was the massive outstanding debt and the history of defaults. I am trapped, unable to make any of the normal life-advancing moves that people my age are making. I am stuck in a state of suspended animation, all because I trusted my parents' promise. The social and emotional toll has been just as devastating. How do you explain to your friends why you can never go out, why you can't afford a vacation, or why you're still living in a tiny rental apartment? The shame is constant. It feels like a personal failure, even though I know I was manipulated. It has isolated me. I avoid talking about the future because mine looks so bleak. I see my peers getting married, buying houses, and starting families, and I feel like I'm watching a movie about a life I'll never have. The most surreal part is how my family continues on, completely unbothered. I see pictures of them on social media, going out to nice dinners, taking weekend trips. My parents bought Alex a new car to help him get back on his feet. They celebrate his tiny, insignificant victories, like completing an online course or cleaning the garage. It's as if my financial destruction never happened. They have compartmentalized their betrayal so perfectly that they feel no guilt, no remorse. In their story, they are the loving parents supporting a son through a tough time. I stopped speaking to them a few months ago. The final straw was a phone call from my mother, asking if I could lend Alex a few $100s to fix his new car's bumper. The audacity, the complete and utter lack of awareness, was staggering. I didn't yell. I just said no and hung up. I haven't answered their calls or texts since. The silence is painful, but it's less painful than the constant, infuriating reminders of their profound selfishness and the double standard that has governed my entire life. Now, my life is a monotonous cycle of work and budgeting. I track every penny. I've taken on freelance work in the evenings and on weekends, trying to throw a little extra money at the mountain of debt, but it feels like using a teaspoon to empty the ocean. I am constantly tired, a deep soul-crushing weariness that sleep doesn't fix. The stress manifests in physical ways too. Headaches, insomnia, a constant knot of anxiety in my stomach. I feel like an old man, burdened by regrets and obligations that should have never been mine to carry. I sometimes wonder if they ever think about me, if they ever feel a pang of guilt for what they did. I doubt it. Protecting Alex's ego is a full-time job, and it leaves no room for anything else. They needed a villain in the story of his failure, a scapegoat to blame for the consequences, and I was the most convenient choice. By signing that paper, I signed up to be the family's designated failure absorber. It was a role I had been unknowingly groomed for my entire life, the responsible one who could be relied upon to clean up the messes. The hardest part is the loss of trust. I don't think I can ever fully trust anyone again, especially not in a financial or emotional capacity. My family was supposed to be my safe harbor, the one place I could turn to for unconditional support. Instead, they proved to be the pirates who scuttled my ship for their own gain. This experience has rewired my brain, making me cynical and suspicious. I look at displays of family loyalty in movies or in the lives of my friends, and it feels like watching a foreign language film without subtitles. It's a concept I no longer understand. My brother Alex has never once apologized or even acknowledged the role he played in this. In his mind, he is the true victim. He tried, he failed, and now he's healing. He sees the loan as a casualty of the business world, not a personal debt that has ruined his brother's life. The one time I confronted him, he told me to stop being so dramatic and money-obsessed. The irony of him calling me money-obsessed while I am drowning in his debt is so bitter that I can't even find the words to describe it. He is a black hole of responsibility, and my parents are his event horizon. I'm sharing this here, anonymously, because I have nowhere else to turn. I can't afford therapy, and I'm too ashamed to tell my friends the full extent of the situation. I just needed to write it all down, to have the story exist somewhere outside of my own head. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of familial obligation and the destructive power of favoritism. It's about how a promise from the people you love can be the most dangerous weapon of all, used to lull you into a false sense of security before the trap springs. My plan now is simple: survive. I'm exploring options like bankruptcy, though the thought of that formal declaration of failure is humiliating. It might be the only way to get a fresh start, even if it means a decade of further financial restrictions. I have to sever the limb to save the body. The limb, in this case, is the last shred of hope that my family will ever do the right thing. It's a painful amputation, but a necessary one if I'm ever going to move forward and build a life for myself, free from them. The anger is fading now, replaced by a hollow kind of acceptance. They are who they are, and they will never change. They chose their favorite son, and they will continue to choose him, no matter who gets hurt in the process. My mistake was believing for one fleeting moment that I could be a priority. I paid for that moment of hope with my entire future. The cost of that single foolish signature was everything I had and everything I hope to have. It's a debt I'll be paying for years to come, in more ways than just money. So, to anyone reading this who finds themselves in a similar position, I have only one piece of advice. When your family asks you to sacrifice your financial security for their sake, no matter how much they guilt you or what promises they make, the answer must be no. Your future is not a resource to be plundered for someone else's dream. Protect yourself, because no one else will. It's a harsh lesson to learn, and I am the living proof of the consequences of learning it too late. My trust is gone, my savings are gone, and my family is gone. The letters from the collection agency will keep coming. My wages will continue to be garnished, and my family will continue to live in their bubble, insulated from the wreckage they created. I am on my own, adrift on a sea of debt they cast me into. The only thing I have left is the grim satisfaction of knowing the truth. I see them for exactly who they are, stripped of the titles of mother, father, and brother. They are just people who used me and threw me away. And that realization, in its own sad way, is a kind of freedom. Sometimes I lay awake at night and I trace the sequence of events back to that single decision in the kitchen. The pressure, the emotional manipulation, their calculated false promises. It was a perfect trap, laid by the people who knew my weaknesses best. They knew my desire for their approval would eventually outweigh my financial prudence. They counted on it. The cold, premeditated nature of the betrayal is what haunts me the most. It wasn't a mistake or an oversight. It was a conscious choice they made to sacrifice me. I have come to understand that their love was always conditional. It was given freely to Alex, regardless of his faults. But for me, it was something to be earned through utility. I was the reliable son, the stable one, the emergency contact. My purpose was to be a safety net. And when the safety net was finally used, they were surprised and annoyed that it had been damaged in the process of saving their favorite. They never saw me as a person with my own dreams, only as a resource to be deployed for the benefit of their golden child. I am working on a long-term plan to declare bankruptcy. I've had a free consultation with a lawyer, and it seems like the most viable, albeit painful path forward. The idea of having that black mark on my record for 7 to 10 years is horrifying, but it's better than spending the next 30 years paying for my brother's failed fantasy. It feels like a surrender, but maybe it's more of a strategic retreat. It's me finally choosing to save myself, since it's clear no one else will ever be coming to my rescue. The process of untangling myself from my family is ongoing. I've blocked their numbers and their social media profiles. It feels extreme, but it's a necessary act of self-preservation. Each notification from them was like a small dose of poison, a reminder of their betrayal that would send me spiraling for the rest of the day. Creating this distance is the only way I can begin to heal and focus on the monumental task of rebuilding my life from the ground up, on my own terms. The other day, I walked past a park and saw a father teaching his 2 sons how to throw a baseball. He was patient with both of them, praising the older one's strength and the younger one's technique. There was an equity to his attention, a simple fairness that struck me so profoundly it almost brought me to tears. It was a glimpse into a world of familial love that I have never known. It made me realize how starved I have been for that kind of simple, unconditional regard my entire life. My goal is no longer to be rich or successful in the way I once imagined. My goals are now much simpler: to be solvent, to be independent, and to be at peace. I want to reach a point where the first thing I think about in the morning isn't the crushing weight of my debt. I want to be able to make a small purchase without feeling a wave of guilt and panic. These small freedoms, which I once took for granted, are now the ultimate luxuries I am striving for. This whole ordeal has taught me the true meaning of self-reliance. It has forced me to become my own parent, my own protector, and my own provider in a way I never had to before. I have to be the one to set boundaries, to make tough decisions, and to offer myself the encouragement that my family always withheld. It's an exhausting and lonely role to play, but it's also empowering. I am building a foundation within myself that no one can ever take away from me again. The question I keep asking myself is, was it worth it to them? Was the fleeting dream of Alex's success worth the complete and utter destruction of their relationship with their other son? Did they ever weigh the consequences? Or were they so blinded by their favoritism that they couldn't see the damage they were causing? I suspect I will never know the answer, and perhaps it doesn't matter. The outcome is the same regardless of their intentions. The damage is done, and I am the one left to pick up the pieces. My apartment feels emptier these days. I've sold off many of my non-essential belongings to make a little extra cash. My bookshelf is thinner. My walls are barer. It's a physical manifestation of how my life has been stripped down to its bare essentials. There's a starkness to my existence now, a lack of comfort and joy, but there is also a strange clarity in it. With everything else gone, I can see the path forward more clearly, even if it's a difficult one. I no longer dream of reconciliation. That ship has sailed, sunk, and turned to dust at the bottom of the sea. There is no apology they could offer that would undo the financial ruin or mend the trust they shattered. You can't rebuild a bridge after you've intentionally dynamited the foundations. All I can do is learn to live on my side of the chasm and accept that they will forever remain on the other. The only person I feel any real sympathy for in this situation, besides myself, is the future version of Alex. One day our parents will be gone, and their protective shield will be gone with them. He will be a middle-aged man with no skills, no resilience, and no understanding of how the real world works. He will have no one left to bail him out. On that day, He will finally have to face the consequences of his own actions, and I will not be there to absorb them for him. This forum post has become much longer than I intended. It seems there was a lot more pain and anger bottled up inside me than I realized. Putting it into words has been difficult, but it has also felt necessary. It's like lancing a wound. It hurts, but it's the only way to let the poison out so that the healing process can finally begin. I feel a little lighter now, a little less burdened by the silence. I am not sure what the future holds for me. The road ahead is long and arduous, and there are no guarantees of a happy ending. But for the first time in a long time, I feel a flicker of something that isn't despair. It might be hope, or it might just be the stubborn refusal to be completely destroyed. I will survive this. I will rebuild, and I will do it without them. My new family will be one of my own choosing, built on a foundation of mutual respect and honesty. The biggest challenge is forgiving myself. I am angry at my family, but I am also angry at myself for being so naive, for wanting their approval so badly that I was willing to bet my future on a promise they never intended to keep. I have to learn to let go of that self-recrimination. I was a victim of a calculated manipulation, and while I made the final decision to sign, the choice was not made in a vacuum. It was made under immense, sustained, and unfair pressure. The loneliness is the hardest part of the day-to-day struggle. Coming home to an empty apartment after a 12-hour workday, knowing that I have no one to lean on, is a heavy burden. My friends try to be supportive, but they can't fully understand the depth of the betrayal. It's a unique kind of grief, mourning the loss of a family that is still alive. It's the realization that the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally were actually the greatest threat to your well-being. I hope that one day, years from now, I will be able to look back on this period of my life as a distant memory, a painful chapter that ultimately made me stronger. I hope to have a life that is full and meaningful, defined not by the debt I was forced into, but by the resilience I showed in overcoming it. That is the future I am now fighting for, a future where my net worth is not determined by a bank statement, but by my character and my capacity for peace. I will read this back to myself whenever I feel weak, whenever I am tempted to fall back into despair. It will be my reminder of what I have survived and why I must keep fighting. This story, in all its ugly detail, is now my declaration of independence. It is the end of my life as my family's scapegoat and the beginning of my life as my own man. The cost of this freedom was unthinkably high, but I will not let it have been in vain. My focus is now entirely on the practical steps. I am creating a detailed multi-year budget that will guide every single financial decision I make. I am researching bankruptcy laws and preparing the necessary documentation. I am treating my financial recovery like a full-time job, which, in addition to my actual full-time job, is exhausting but necessary. I am taking control of the narrative, no longer a passive victim, but an active agent in my own rescue. Thank you for providing a space for me to share this. It means more than you know to be able to put this story out into the world, to have it witnessed, even by strangers. It makes the burden feel a little less lonely, a little more bearable. For anyone who has read this far, I appreciate your time. I am not looking for pity, only for the shared understanding that sometimes the people who are supposed to build you up are the ones who tear you down. I am closing this chapter of my life. The anger and the grief will likely linger for a long time, but they will no longer be the driving forces in my life. My new motivation is the quiet, determined pursuit of stability and peace. I will pay off this debt, either through bankruptcy or a long, arduous repayment plan. I will rebuild my credit. I will save again. And I will never, ever allow myself to be put in a position of such vulnerability again. My strength is all I have left. My final thought is for my parents. I wonder if they ever consider the true price of what they did. They saved their favorite son from the temporary sting of failure, but in doing so, they lost their other son completely and forever. They traded a relationship built on years of my loyalty and trust for a lie, for the comfort of maintaining the fantasy that their golden child could do no wrong. It was a terrible bargain, and I hope for their sake that they find it was worth the price. This is the end of my story, but it is the beginning of my recovery. The path is uncertain, and the weight I carry is immense. But for the first time, I don't feel like I'm sinking anymore. I am treading water, and soon I will begin the long, slow swim back to shore. It won't be easy, but I will do it. I have to. The alternative is to let them win, to let their betrayal be the defining story of my life. And that is a conclusion I refuse to accept. My name is on the default notice, but the fault is not mine. It took me a long time to understand that, to separate the legal responsibility from the moral one. Legally, I am liable. Morally, my hands are clean. My only crime was trusting my family. It's a mistake I will pay for financially for a very long time, but it's a mistake I will never make again. My future relationships will be built on a foundation of proven actions, not empty promises. The weariness is what remains. A deep, bone-aching exhaustion from the constant stress and the emotional turmoil. But beneath it, a small, hard kernel of resolve is forming. They took my money, my credit, and my trust, but they cannot take my will to survive. That I will hold on to, no matter what. It is the most valuable asset I have left, and it is the one thing they can never touch. It is the engine that will power my recovery. I look at the default notice one last time before putting it in the file with the others. It's just a piece of paper. It's a record of a transaction, of a promise made and a promise broken. It does not define me. My response to it, my fight to overcome it, is what will define me. The story isn't over. They wrote the beginning, a tale of betrayal and financial ruin, but I will be the one to write the ending.